Hey, deserving listeners, Love is Blind. Let's watch.
But I feel like one of my biggest lessons that I've had from relationships in the past, mainly in my first relationship, was that I feel like I overshared a lot with my parents, and I feel like they were very involved in my relationship, and I completely learned that that's a no-go.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. So Amy is saying that she overshared with her parents. That was a big mistake. I think what she means is that she shared too much about her relationship, maybe even her complaints. And that is something to think about when you have complaints about your partner, or really anyone in your life, your boss, your work, your children, and you go to people, particularly maybe a set of people, maybe even one person, like your parents, you go to both of them, and you tend to use them in a healthy way as a sounding board or as a person to vent to, get support around. But you have to be careful, because if it's your parents, then they have a vested interest. They also have a relationship with your partner. If you give them, even if it's 30% negative stuff, then your parents are going to be biased about who your partner is and about your relationship. And so, one, don't be surprised when they say, I don't support this relationship anymore, when in fact for you, the negative stuff is only 1%, but you tend to go to your parents to only tell them about the negative. You don't go to them every time there's a good thing happening. And so don't be surprised when they don't support, and also don't be surprised when your parents hate your partner. And then that can cause problems. So I wonder if that's what she's talking about, or is she talking about enmeshment, like they start to become domineering with her or something? Because, earlier she mentioned that her dad is not pleased, doesn't support her going on the show. She seemed to talk about how that's going to be an issue.
But I do have that fear that they'll try to involve themselves, especially my dad. I don't think he understands this process at all, because it's not traditional by any means. And I feel like they care too much and they're super overprotective, which I get to an extent.
Okay, so she's saying that her parents are super overprotective, and that particularly her dad, they're going to involve themselves. Now, there's a huge spectrum there. I'm guessing where the parents are on that spectrum, because you've seen that scene that I'm guessing is coming. But the spectrum could be from the more balanced side, the more workable side for her, of the parents caring a lot and expressing concern and talking with her a lot, maybe with some amount of intensity, but it's ultimately flexible and the parents don't punish her. And even if they have their major reservations, they put that aside and say, well, we love our daughter and we don't want her to feel bad about her life and her decision and her marriage. So we'll choose to support it, and we'll choose to focus on the positive. We'll choose to try to be more optimistic, but I still have my concerns. That's on one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum is that they punish her, and I guess at the far end of the spectrum, they disown her if she doesn't follow their recommendation or their hopes for her. I guess other manifestations would be to try to sabotage the relationship, or to say, hey, if you choose to be with him, then I will no longer have a relationship with you. At least when I hear that from Amy, it makes me sad that she feels that lack of support or that judgment. She's a grown woman. She's 27 years old. She can make her own choices, and to be infantilized like that by her parents, just be given the message that they don't trust your life choices and you don't deserve to have that space to make your own choices. It's pretty disrespectful, really, for a grown woman to make a choice that's her choice, and it's her life, it's her time. She can do with it what she wants to, and without any information from the outside, just to say, I just disapprove. I don't think what you're doing is smart. I think it's a bad choice. I mean, you don't know, really. It's pretty disrespectful. Having said all that, I absolutely understand, right? Because if you had even just an acquaintance, but let alone your own child, even though she is 27, if they told you that they were going to go on a reality TV show in which you got, if it's successful, what you're shooting for is to get engaged within 10 days to someone that you haven't seen, someone that you've never met their family, your families haven't met. The person could be a scam artist or a psychopath, and it's not enough time to vet that person. You're going to become engaged before I even meet this person. That is very scary. I've heard of bad situations happening. So because I love you, I am very much against doing that. There's no need to do that. It's not the only way to meet someone, right? There's a lot of ways to meet someone. Why are you doing it this way, right? So I totally get that, especially for the majority of people because they've never seen this show before. When I first heard of this show, I thought, well, that's ridiculous. But watching it and seeing it succeed, small percentage of the time, I no longer think it is absurd that someone would legitimately go on this show to try to meet the love of their life. It does happen. And if it doesn't happen, it's just 2 to 3 months out of your life, right? It's not the end of the world. It's a concentrated experiment to see if you can actually make this work, right? So, low cost, high payout, benefit. Now, of course, the other cost is that everyone in the world will hate you if you have some edges to your personality and they edit it in a certain way. So it's not without its pitfalls.
In the past, I was very easily influenced, and that also caused a lot of tensions within my relationships. So I'd like to think that I'm not as influenced, but it's hard not to get influenced when you're about to take such a huge leap in 4 weeks.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, that was one of the options I was thinking is what does she mean by over-involvement or oversharing? So it sounds like her parents will go on the warpath to convince her that she shouldn't be with this person. And then, that's what it sounds like, right? And looking back, she realizes, I'm just easily convincible, or I'm easily influenced. And my dad in particular is, he can be real intense. Is it abusive, or is it just very good at making an argument, making your case? But the red flag here is that she hasn't been allowed to spread her wings, because the way that she's talking, I would have assumed, if I didn't know, I would have assumed that she, or I wouldn't say that, but at the very least, there's signs that she's never been allowed to truly make her own decisions, particularly big ones, and experience the glory and the defeat. That's a part of growing up. You have to go through those to learn. As a parent, you want your child to metaphorically fall on their face sometimes by their own decisions. You're not enthusiastic or looking forward to watching them metaphorically bloody their nose as they make a choice and it goes badly for them. You're not looking forward to that. But what you should be looking forward to is, one, watching them learn for themselves, and two, learning that it's okay, that one, they're competent enough to make a choice and make a decision and assert that, and they're competent enough to get through the negative consequences to that. Now, of course, you don't want them to have too great of negative consequences. Like, they could lose a limb for, you don't want to give a 10-year-old a chainsaw and say, well, they'll fall on their face and they'll learn the hard way. There's obviously a lot of nuance, but I don't know. Maybe the parents allow her to do and have facilitated that freedom to learn for herself in a lot of other domains, but when it comes to marrying someone, maybe that's their one thing, who knows. But the way she's talking, I'm easily influenced, maybe in general. When you are made to underfunction, when you're prevented from developing then you will retain, a 13-year-old typically will not believe that they have the competence to make major decisions in their life, right? Like what sort of career they should commit to, for example, or other kinds of decisions like, say, the family moves to a new community and there are 3 different schools to choose from. Most 13-year-olds don't believe they have the competence to research those 3 schools, reach out to those 3 schools, and decide, right? Most 13-year-olds, at the very least, would want help from their parents to make that decision. They might even feel so incompetent that they're just like, I don't know, you make the choice. Can't you figure it out for me? That would be normal too. So we understand that at different stages of life, there's a different amount of competence that is developmentally within normal limits, right? So let's say you have a 13-year-old that, say, refuses to decide on what to wear to school. And although you're fine with saying, wear that, at some point you're thinking, well, although I am better at picking clothes than he is, but I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life. 1. 2, he needs to learn and start developing that pattern of thinking for himself and making those choices, even if it goes poorly for him. And a part of that for every parent at every step of the way, from the time they're born, the first time your infant crawls a few feet away from you on their own, on their own power, right? Their own ambulatory power, or the first time they stand and walk, right? They can literally fall on their face. But if you hold their hand, they'll never learn how to walk, right? You have to let go and take the risk, and you don't know what's going to happen. And when they're 13 and they're saying, because some kids, because of their personality or their issues or the way you've parented them, they don't generally think they're competent at anything, and so you might have to push them and say, I think it's time that you make your own choices. And, the kid will be like, oh, but I don't know what to do. You just keep saying, I believe in you. And worst case scenario, you don't wear, and if it's completely out of whack, I'll tell you. But, you have a closet full of things. You understand the premise of socks and shoes and underwear and pants and shirt. And, just, I believe in you. And, the kid might even get frustrated with you, and then you're just like, no, I'm not gonna tell. And therapy could be like this with adults that are in these shoes. The client is like, tell me what to do, and I have to provide that corrective experience they weren't given growing up, and saying, I believe in you, and I'm with you, and I'll be right next to you as you make that choice, and I'll be right next to you as you enact that choice, and I'll be right next to you emotionally as you incur any sort of consequences. But it would be harmful for me to tell you what to do in this moment. I know you want me to. This is the dependent personality dynamic. And it's very tempting for therapists to actually give into that, because therapists tend to be the sort of people that like telling people what to do, but also it can feel therapeutic to do so. Yeah, I think you should leave your husband, that kind of thing. It's like, anyway, so, and dependent people are very good at manipulating others into taking over, even though they don't really want you to. Anyway, so overprotective, influence. She just said she's easily influenced. It kind of sounds like what she's saying is she believes she should not have ended relationships in the past, particularly one in the beginning. She shouldn't have done that, but she did it because her parents and her dad in particular were so convincing of her. It's kind of sounds like that, right? It's a red flag for her, and maybe for Johnny and the relationship, of course. But it might, even if they get over this hump, get the parents' approval, that kind of thing, it's possible that Amy in general has this issue. And that's, the additional element of this red flag is that when you aren't given the opportunity, this is another element of the damage that you do to children when you don't allow them to make their own mistakes, and or you don't push them to make their own choices at the appropriate developmental moment, is that they will retain a childish way of looking at responsibilities because they've they haven't gone through those steps. And when they are in a situation, they could be 27, but they might approach big decisions the way a teenager or a child would, in a way that lacks wisdom or experience to draw upon, right? Because every decision or major decision was made for them, and they don't really understand the premise other than that the parents are protective, right? It's like, well, I know why they're doing this is because they don't want me to be hurt, but I also need to live my life. And your first foray, and also you could see how someone would even go on the show, because it specifically is designed to keep the family out. You don't even have your cell phone. So it could mean that her decision to even get engaged, and it certainly doesn't look this way, but you wouldn't necessarily know, that her decision to get engaged to Johnny is not based on a careful evaluation of all the factors internally and externally and emotionally and cognitively and everything, that she hasn't gone through all the steps, or even if she has, she doesn't even know how to answer those questions in a wise way, because she doesn't have those experiences, having made choices for herself, that if she even does manage to get her parents on board, she might realize down the road that she isn't actually interested in being with Johnny for the rest of her life. I've seen that too, where they make decisions. Wisdom is the best word for it. We don't expect a 15-year-old to have the wisdom especially when they're dating and they feel like, oh my God, I want to marry this person. Sort of why we prevent children from marrying, right? One, it's can be harmful, but we also prevent teenagers from making depending on the state, right, and the country. But we don't allow people of a certain age, even if you approve and the child really they want to get married, we say, you're not old enough, right? If you deny children the opportunity to make that particular choice, and maybe a lot of choices, they can be 27 and still have the wisdom of a 13-year-old. Wisdom requires experiencing things, trial and error, within the petri dish that is life. You have to live life to know, to learn, to know yourself, to know how you can predict things, how when it feels like this is usually what it means. Now, she has shown no sign. We haven't seen a lot of detail to these two that could either mean there isn't a lot of harsh edges to their lives or their personalities, or some other reason they're editing it out, or I don't know. So yeah, it is kind of a red flag.
I want that. Mm-hmm. Regardless of what they say, they approve, don't approve. It's my decision, for it. But I still want to hear them out.
If I don't get my dad's blessing, I don't know if I can move forward.
Yeah. I think sometimes people will criticize people that will be in that situation because it's harmful potentially or misleading to get engaged to somebody and fall in love, and they fall in love with you, when there's a third party that might completely put the kibosh on it, right? You probably shouldn't go on a show like this if that's even a mild possibility. Even if it's a 30% possibility, it's like if she said, yeah, there's a 30% possibility that I go on the show, I meet someone that my dad will just put his foot down, and then I don't have a choice. And it's complicated too, because for some people, their family way or culture is that not only is dad maybe being a little invasive, but the value of the adult children is to honor the parents' wishes and not disappoint them, and maybe the grandparents and the aunts and uncles as well. The mainstream white American culture is perhaps one of the most individualistic cultures that's ever existed on the planet, and there's a lot of theory on this. But the typical mainstream American way is well, I decided I'm going to marry this person. And I mean, I guess if my dad disapproves, like, sucks for him, but it's my life. That's a very different way of seeing the world than the way a lot, if not most, of the people on the planet see their obligations, the meaning of life, right? For a lot of Americans, the meaning of life, and as an adult, is that marriage. But for other people, the meaning of life is to integrate into a family, to be a part of your family, extended family, maybe even your community. Although marriage is very, very important, it must fit into that system rather than the other way around, So she could be speaking from that place in addition to because it sounds like that's what she's, because if she was only talking about undue influence and undue invasion from the father, you wouldn't imagine that she would say, well, if he puts his foot down, then I'm just going to allow myself to go against what I want, right? I think what she's saying is, I choose not to live in a world in which I have to reject my parents and give up that relationship for someone else. It means too much to me. And, that could be very foreign. It could be a very a strange idea. It can feel like, this happens on 90 Day Fiancé a lot, and it could feel like to the Johnnies of the world, it's like, oh, well, then you must not really love me. But that isn't necessarily true. It's just a different emphasis. All right, well, let's adjourn there. And everyone, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.